Okay, so I'm going to start painting my miniature of Hagan Lightfoot. And I had a comment, somebody was asking me how do they compare with 28mm miniatures. Now, Hero Forge I think say that their miniatures are 30mm, so you'd expect them to be a little bit bigger. When I first saw it I thought, yeah, it's about the same size. This is a Warlord Miniatures 28mm paratrooper that I painted, and you can see that they're kind of roughly the same size. However, Hagan is a halfling or a hobbit, so you would expect her to be a little bit shorter, and she's kind of nearly the same height as this para, but you know, it's not a massive difference. So in terms of bases, they measure up. It's pretty much the same diameter. So yeah, just a little quick comparison, but you know, I don't think you'd notice on a tabletop, and to be honest I don't know how they compare with sort of, I don't know, D&D miniatures or anything like that. So I'm going to start painting. What I like to do first of all is I just get one of these little takeaway boxes, well, not takeaway, they're kind of ready meal boxes, but they have compartments, so I'll put a little bit of water in one and then I mix my paints in the other. I always like to start my miniatures by painting the flesh colours. So I'm going to use Army Painter Barbarian Flesh. They do a sort of basic set of paints, so I'm going to try and use those as much as I can for this miniature. And I'm going to use a standard brush. These small Citadel brushes that I had kicking around, but you can get Army Painter ones. So I'm just going to put a little bit, give it a little bit of a shake and put a little bit in my palette. What you might want to do is think about watering it down a little bit. It's just to see how it flows onto the miniature. But you don't have to be too exact at the moment. I always like to go and sort of tick in where I've finished or where I've painted later on. So I'm going to be fairly rough with it. And it's going on to that primer that it came with, already primed, pretty well. So I'm going to tick in all of the details and I'll be back when the flesh colours are on. Right, so I'll put the flesh colour on. It's not gone on everywhere fantastically, but I will touch that back in again later on. The other thing I keep on forgetting to say is that you can have the name of your character or other things put on the base, which is kind of cool. So now I'm going to go in and put in all of the leather brown items with Army Painted Leather Brown, and I'll be back when I finish that. Okay, so painted the leather brown, and what I'm going to do now is paint the hair with Army Painted Demonic Yellow. Now this is quite bright, this colour, but by the time I've added some wash it should tone it down a bit, hopefully. Okay, so put the hair colour on, and next stage is I'm going to use Army Painter Green Skin to paint the sort of mouth covering, and I'm also going to do the bedroll on the back. Okay, so I've painted the mouth covering and the bedroll. Next I'm going to do the mushroom clusters. I'm going to do them with matte white, Army Painter matte white. Again, I'm hoping that the wash will sort of tone them down a little bit. So I've painted the mushroom clusters. The next job is to paint the metal areas with Army Painter matte black. I painted all of the metal areas black. So next job is to paint the stone on the base with Army Painter Uniform Grey. This one isn't in the basic paint set, but it's one that I use to prime a lot of my miniatures with, so I would probably have it anyway. Okay, so now the base is all painted. I'm going to go back in using a fine detail brush, which is a lot thinner, and just try and tidy up all of the edges, paint over any bits where the paint hasn't covered very well. Don't know how clearly you can see it, but the back of the hairs looks like it needs a bit more. And I'll be back when all that's done. Okay, so now that's tidied up, the next stage is to take a standard brush, and I'm going to use Army Painter's Strong Tone. This is really runny, so I'm going to put it into the palette, and I'm not going to add any water to this one, and then just dip the Strong Tone brush, the standard brush into the Strong Tone, and what this will do is it will run into all of the recesses. So I'm just going to cover the whole miniature with the Strong Tone. It's going to darken everything down, but then we can always highlight it later. Okay, so now the Strong Tone wash has gone on, I'm going to go back in with my original colours, and I'm just going to highlight any areas that are a bit raised, just to sort of make them ping out a little bit from the shadow that's just gone on. So things like the nose, cheeks, ridges of the fingers, that kind of thing. But I'm going to do that with the armour as well, the leather, and the hair as well. So highlighted, and they're starting to pop a little bit, those highlights now. Next thing we're going to do, and I'm going to do the same with the green mouth covering and the bedroll. I'm going to use a technique called dry brushing. You can use a bit of tissue paper or a bit of kitchen roll, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to load a little dry brush up with a bit of the colour that I want to dry brush. I'm going to start with the hair, and I'm going to take most of that paint off by just dragging it across the tissue paper, so you can see there's hardly any on there at all. And then over the ridges, I'm just going to drag that brush across those areas, and that will help to pick up on those raised areas. So I'm going to do that for the hair. If you realise the brush isn't putting any paint on, you just add a bit more paint. I'll do that for the hair and the bedroll and the mouth covering. Now that's done, I'm going to do the same technique using Army Painter Plate Mail Metal, just for the large areas of armour. Any of the smaller areas, I'm going to use a small detail brush to pick those out. Now the metal areas are dry brushed and the buckles and things picked out with the fine detail brush. I'm going to dry brush the base, hopefully pick out some of those cobblestones. I'm going to leave the mushrooms as they are. I think if I try and dry brush those with a white, it's just going to make them look too kind of artificial, and I quite like the colour. It looks quite natural the way it is. Okay, now the base is dry brushed. I'm going to go in and mix a little bit of Army Painter Matte White with all of the colours that I want to highlight. So I'm now going to be looking at the absolutely highest points, like the tip of the nose, tip of the cheek, right on the knuckles, all of those sort of areas. Just trying to use that tint to make them look a little bit more alive. Okay, so we're nearly there. Last thing I want to do really is paint the eye. This is a really fiddly job, so the best thing to do first is to paint the eye black, then paint white over that, and then the tiniest of little black dots just where the eye is. Whilst I'm waiting for those to dry, I'm also going to paint the edge of the base in the sort of leather brown colour, so it looks like the earth underneath the cobblestones. Okay, so the next and last stage really is varnishing the model. This will just help it to take a few knocks if it falls off a table or people
moving them around. I'm going to use Army Painter matte varnish. I've followed all the instructions on the back. As you can see, I'm out in the garage and it's well ventilated. Got to give it a good shake, and it's important not to put the coats on too heavily, so it's better to actually underdo it than overdo it. So I'm going to stay well back from the model, spray with hopefully some nice even coats. I put it on a little bit of cardboard so I can move the model around and spray the back.
So there we have it, finished model, all varnished, ready for the tabletop. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. Best thing to do really if you want to get into painting is just get some paints. You don't have to spend a fortune. A few brushes, again, you don't have to spend a fortune, and just spend some time on it and have fun.